What's up, guys? This is manic.mercurian with your forecast for the week of February 10th through 16th, 2025. Okay, so just a recap real quick on what happened last week. Last week, Jupiter stationed direct, Venus entered Aries, and Neptune made the exact conjunction to the North Node. So I really think, although each of those events is completely different, the commonality is that these are all intense, right? Uranus also stationed direct recently, just a couple weeks ago. And so really, I think things are ramping up, and I think that's not hard to see or to feel. I'm not the only one that has felt the energy that, like, there's an uptick in the energy, and it's going to increase. This is only the beginning. Really, all of spring and early summer, things are really going to hit the fan this year. There's going to be a lot of action and activity, both on a national and international level in the news, but also on a very personal level as well. And again, we are seeing the beginning of that now. Okay, so this week, that will continue. That trend will continue. Things are intensifying. I want to show you a chart real quick. So this chart is for Saturday, March 1st of this year, just a few weeks away. And if this chart looks intense, it's because it is. You can see this huge cluster in Pisces and Aries. It's actually very reminiscent of the chart that we saw, last April. We had so many planets clustering around the same area. So that will happen again this year. We're already, seeing the planets start to cluster now. Even right now, for the start of this week, Monday, February 10th, we have most of the planets clustered in Aquarius and Pisces and Aries. But yeah, that will continue. March 1st again, so many planets, Chiron, Venus, Moon, Moon, of course, travels very quickly, but let's just go with this chart. Chiron, Venus, Moon, Neptune, North Node, Chiron, Venus, Moon in Aries, Neptune, North Node, Mercury, Saturn, Sun in Pisces, but they're all clustered in the same general area. So whenever we see a cluster, we see things happen. Things become intense because there are so many conjunctions happening. Each of us has a different part of our chart that's completely highlighted by a cluster like this. Where is Aries in your chart? Where is Pisces in your chart? Is your ascendant around there? Well, that means that you are changing on a massive level. You are about to change on a massive level, and you probably did change on a massive level last March or April when a very similar phenomenon happened then as well. But maybe your ascendant isn't there. Maybe this is the top of your chart. Your career, your public image is changing. Maybe it's the bottom of your chart. It's your home and family, etc. If it's around your descendant, then your relationships are changing. But each person has some part of their life that is going to start dramatically changing. Maybe multiple parts of your life. So that's the general trajectory. But what is happening this week? Well, kind of a lot. Mercury's changing signs. We'll talk about that. One major theme, I know a lot of people are probably thinking about the full moon. I will, of course, talk about the full moon. But the full moon is actually part of a greater pattern that I've observed for this week. So I mentioned how, again, the planets are generally clustered in Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. Of course, there are the three outliers, the three fallen outliers: Uranus, Jupiter, Mars, all in fall or detriment in Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, respectively. But other than those three, all the planets, other than those three and the moon, all the other planets are in Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. So why is that significant for this week? Well, because the moon will be transiting from Cancer through Libra this week. And as it does so, I'll show you really briefly the charts for this week. So at the beginning of the week, on Monday, Moon starts out entering Leo about midday Eastern time, and as it does so, it steps into an opposition with Pluto. This is only the first of many oppositions that the Moon will make. Basically, the Moon will oppose all of these Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries planets this week. And part of that is the Leo full moon, which, of course, we will talk about that It's on Wednesday the 12th, in case you're curious. Valentine's Day will still be kind of like within orb of that full moon, even though the moon will be in Virgo by Valentine's Day. Very awkward, by the way. Very strange dynamic we have for, really any Valentine's Day having Sun in Aquarius, probably the least romantic sign, right? But especially with moon in Virgo, another sign that's not very romantic at all. Very interesting and strange. But we'll talk about that in more detail when we get there. But going back to my point, going to the end of the week, the weekend, the middle of the week, moon travels through Leo and Virgo and opposes, the other, opposes the sun in Aquarius, and then multiple planets in Pisces. And by the end of the week, moon will enter Libra, where it opposes Venus. So many oppositions. And, in case you're not aware, I know there's people that tune in of different varying degrees of astrological expertise, let's just say. So, the oppositions are intense. An opposition is the aspect of a full moon. Most people are familiar with the energy of a full moon. It's intense, it's wild, it's a culmination. It's often a turning point. It's often very dramatic, and I think I already said intense. Sparks can definitely fly with a full moon or with any opposition. Sparks flying, whether that be in like a romantic context or sexual or maybe aggression. There could be a fight, there could be a party. It seems like there's just so much activity in general. There's so much energy during an opposition. It's the culmination, it's the midpoint of that cycle, whatever the opposition is. Like with the full moon, that's the midpoint of the lunar cycle. But with any opposition, it represents a midpoint. And during that midpoint, I believe the midpoint of any cycle tends to generally be the most complex. The energy is so rich and so nuanced, and there's so many different things happening. It's very different from a conjunction where, conjunctions are also intense, but in a completely different way. They're opposite. An opposition, if that makes sense. So anyway, the point is, this week is about culminations. It's intense, it's raw. I'm on the March 1st chart again. Let me not get lost, let me focus. But it's intense. There's gonna be a lot shifting, a lot changing, and in many ways this week is the culmination. It's the climax, if you will. But depending on how you look at it, this is all this buildup and all this culmination this week. Really, this is just setting the stage for further intensity that will come later. Again, like I was talking about. So yes, like things will peak and clash and hit a boiling point this week, but this is only beginning things. Okay, if you think the news has been crazy, this is just the beginning. I predicted this, okay? I didn't predict specifically. I always say, like, I can only half predict things. But I've been looking for years and looking at spring and summer of 2025. And for years, I've been waiting for this. I'm excited. I believe the transits and the ingressions will be generally positive for myself as well as the world. That's a huge generalization, but that's what I personally believe. I'm an optimist. But of course, it's going to be different from everyone, and it's not going to be a smooth ride. It's going to be bumpy. Whatever. Let's get into the day-by-day forecast before I ramble too much and lose everybody. So starting out with Monday, February 10th, again, in the first hours of the day, Eastern time, moon will still be in Cancer. But, almost exactly at noon, actually, Eastern time, moon will enter Leo. So in other words, for most of us in the West, in America and Europe, moon will be in Cancer the first half of the day, roughly speaking, and then moon in Leo the latter half of the day. So as the moon enters Leo, we're seeing an uptick in the energy because Leo is the sign where the moon will be full. Technically, it's not full yet, but if you see it in the sky, it will appear pretty full, almost full. So of course there's an analogy there. There's a metaphor, but it's a very literal metaphor. Just like the moon is almost full, it's peak energy, peak light, or almost peak light is what I'm saying. We're starting to enter the vicinity of the peak. So all the drama that we're familiar with a full moon, that's even going to be more intense considering the signs that we're dealing with. Sun in Aquarius being opposed by moon in Leo. Moon in Leo, I mean, it doesn't get much more dramatic than that, especially with this opposition aspect that's forming with the sun. So very intense, very dramatic. Where does Leo fall in your chart? What placements do you have there? That's what you need to know to see more specifically how this will affect you. But for us in general, this looks like party energy to me. But again, it's going to be all across the board. There's going to be, I don't know, maybe more accidents, but also more, it's like a movie. It's dramatic. It's theatrical. That's the best way I can put it. There is another development that's happening at the beginning of the week. So for Monday as well as Tuesday, I'm really including both days here, but basically there's this thing happening where Mercury and Sun, technically they just conjoined on Sunday the 9th, but they're still within orb of a conjunction. And as they are kind of hanging out around 23 degrees Aquarius on Monday and Tuesday, Mercury and the Sun, both, first Mercury and then the Sun will square Uranus at 23 Taurus. So this is another reason why I'm saying this week is going to shake things up. This is a big deal. This is intense, specifically when it comes to epiphanies, okay? When we're channeling in this Uranian energy through this square aspect, it's volatile, it's sudden, it's dramatic. It may feel like the full moon is already happening, but again, part of that may be because of the squares to Uranus. I always say with Uranus, yes, it is, the planet of earthquakes. It's unpredictable, it's volatile, it's sudden, expect the unexpected. But Uranus is more of like an air planet. It's not a fire planet. Like my distinction here is that with Uranus, I believe that the change, when Uranus is involved, the change actually comes from within you or within me or within us, within humanity or within whatever, within consciousness. That's where there's a shift with Uranian aspects. Okay, it doesn't start out on a physical level. It starts out in your mind or maybe in your feeling, like however your intuition works, whether it's more mental or emotional or something completely different. That's where there's going to be a change. You may suddenly become aware of something. Your perception may shift. You may see things in a different light. And as you have that new awareness and that new intelligence, there comes a responsibility. And that's why a lot of people in astrology don't like Uranus because, well, for one, it's unpredictable, and that can be jarring and shocking and even traumatic. But again, also because with that new awareness, there's responsibility. What do I do? There may be something like part of your life, a situation that you were content with for years, and an aspect like this comes along, and especially if it fits in your chart a certain way, suddenly that situation that was good enough for years or however long, suddenly it may not be good enough anymore. And then that's when the choice comes. What do you do with this information? What do you do with this new perception? Can you just go on living your life with a completely new opinion or a new view? Or do you have to make dramatic changes? That's where free will becomes involved. It's up to you. Okay. Before, anyone listening to this, you are clearly interested in consciousness, the spiraling evolution of consciousness. You're interested in self-awareness and introspection. And so, me personally, I love Uranus aspects, especially a square like this. I understand squares are volatile. This will be unpredictable. It's going to be a crazy day, crazy start to the week. But as long as you know that, that's the whole point of why we're talking about this right now. As long as you understand, expect the unexpected. This is not going to be a smooth ride coming into this week. As long as you can embrace that, you may have some pretty freaking cool epiphanies and sudden shifts in your awareness. So, you might really figure out things in a dramatic way on Monday and or Tuesday with these squares. I'm actually going to move ahead because honestly, much of what I'm saying for Monday applies to Tuesday as well. We still have that buildup of the almost full moon in Leo, and we still have, Mercury and Sun basically both squaring Uranus for both Monday and Tuesday. Wow, look at this grand trine. That's kind of pretty, except I think it's involving, I don't know what this thing is, honestly. Is that the part of fortune? I'm rusty on my parts. I don't really follow those. But But yeah, you can see Mars like loosely trining Saturn. I'm honestly not going to talk about that. I don't think that's the highlight of the day. I think the highlight is Mercury and Sun squaring Uranus, and Moon on the edge, on the cusp of being full in Leo. Things are intensifying. For those of you that get bored easily, you're going to love Monday and Tuesday. For those of you that want to figure things out and learn things and embrace a new reality, this is going to be your cup of tea. If you are someone that wants the status quo and you resist change, this may be difficult. It's going to be dramatic. There's going to be a lot of change. Let's look at the chart for Wednesday. So this is where we have the exact full moon that we've been, building up so much, for this whole week so far. Finally, we get that kind of release, so to speak. I feel like this all sounds very sexual, but whatever. We get this kind of release on Wednesday, the 12th. I think shit really just hits the fan. This is party energy, but I could see a party getting out of hand. There's just so much energy. It's just it's interesting in a way. I think it's refreshing. We've had, well, especially for me personally, because most of my planets are where the moon is. It's honestly been really difficult for me to experience all these planets in Pisces and Aquarius, because that's not my area. What's my point? My point was, in a way, it's refreshing to channel in this huge burst of energy from this part of the chart that was otherwise kind of neglected, if that makes sense. We're channeling in this like summer energy in the middle of winter, basically. Suddenly we have all this Leo, fun, party, warm kind of energy. So yeah, in that respect, I do think it's refreshing. But at the same time, it's a huge clash. It's like bringing a hot summer day into the middle of winter. How does that work? It's completely at odds with everything. It totally disrupts everything, right? That's exactly what this chart is like to me, in my personal opinion. So yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, you can look to where, it specifically 24 degrees Leo, where does that fall in your chart? Because there's some kind of culmination there for you on or around Wednesday the 12th. And there may be a need for some kind of change. You're being thrust into a new situation. What's even more interesting too? This full moon makes a T-square with Uranus. So we're not quite done with these squares to Uranus. Technically, Sun and Mercury have moved on, but they're still easily within orb of the squares to Uranus, especially the Sun. It's only 1 degree off from being exact. So yeah, what do you get when you mix Sun in Aquarius, square Uranus in Taurus, square Moon in Leo? It's a fixed T-square. It's kind of like gridlock. Each of these fixed signs is so strong-willed. It's so stubborn, right? The energy is so pure. You have like pure air with Aquarius, pure earth with Taurus, pure fire with Leo. Each of those elements doesn't want to mix with the other elements. It's very firm within itself, okay? These are not mutable signs. They're not even cardinal. They want to do what they want to do. It's that simple. It's black and white, right? So that's where things can be very dramatic when you try to combine these things. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, as they say. They're just not going to mix, It's a little bit different with compatibility. I actually like pairing fixed signs together with compatibility because they do butt heads, but they tend to respect each other. But that's beside the point. When it comes to a transit like this, it's intense. It's, how do you satisfy these three different energies? They are fundamentally at odds to one another. So again, that's where you get the clash. That's where you get the explosion. And specifically with Uranus, that's where huge epiphanies, profound awakenings, maybe that should be the title of this video. That was an awakening for me. That was a realization. But yeah, really, as I'm going through the charts, it's occurring to me realizations all week, definitely Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and it's going to continue onto Thursday as well, because these energies are just so intense. I think that's a good segue. Yeah, okay. Huge new awakenings, huge new perception changes. Moon still needs to oppose all these other planets. It's still going to do that this week. There is a huge shift as we enter Thursday, because very late Wednesday Eastern time, Moon will leave Leo and enter Virgo right around midnight of that night Eastern time. So at least for that time zone, which I don't even live in anymore. But anyway, for Eastern time, basically Thursday we'll have moon in Virgo all day. So I kind of like that. I think it's nice when we get a full moon kind of late in a sign, because it's like there's this huge explosion and then suddenly things shift. And especially with the moon entering a yin sign like Virgo, I think things are going to cool down somewhat dramatically on Thursday, yet they are still relatively high strung, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Like there's a sudden cool down, but things are still tense, things are still active. They're not nearly as active as they were like Tuesday, Wednesday, but there's still a lot going on. And there may be sort of aftershock, so to speak. Maybe literally, but I mostly mean figuratively. Major earthquakes, huge tremors Monday and building up to Tuesday, and then Wednesday is the big earthquake, so to speak, figuratively. But yeah, again, aftershocks Thursday, things quieting down a little bit, simmering down just a bit. Moon in Virgo wants peace. I guess that's true. It wants to organize things. It wants to make sense of things. It wants to like simmer things down a little bit. It's really interesting how Moon in Virgo contrasts from most of these other placements. How do you mix Moon in Virgo with 3 planets in Aquarius, or 2 planets in Pisces, or Venus and Chiron in Aries? It's a very different energy. So where am I going with this? I still think there's a clash here. There's like tension. Virgo can be an anxious sign as well. I think this is we're seeing the anxious side of Moon in Virgo, because again, although Moon is not officially opposing anything today, Moon is still at odds with basically everything else in the chart other than Uranus, but they're outnumbered. So yeah, there's this friction. Things are off kilter. It's almost like I'm imagining if you had like a marble on a table and then suddenly you tilt the table. Like things are off level, and that's creating movement. It's creating the opportunity for growth or for change. Okay. So yeah, really that's the theme all week, but that continues to Thursday as well. I would say take advantage of the Virgo energy, because again, we just don't see anything like this anywhere around this time, Thursday the 13th. And I know Virgo energy is not everyone's favorite. It's not my favorite, but it is great for organizing, making sense of things. As I said, let's be practical. Let's synthesize. Let's digest things a little bit. Let's process. There's so much going on, and there's going to continue to be a lot going on. So let's just like chill for a second. Or, let's digest things a little bit, mentally and emotionally before we continue. Going through to Friday, Moon continues through Virgo. So again, Thursday and Friday are very similar astrologically, in my opinion. The difference is Friday the 14th, Valentine's Day, Mercury enters Pisces. I was going to say Valentine's Day in the United States, but I actually just learned today that Valentine's Day is celebrated internationally, which I never knew that. Did everyone else know that? I didn't know, like in the Middle East, for example. I love maths. If you're hearing this, you should leave a comment. But he just told me today that Valentine's Day is a big deal in the United Arab Emirates, which I find very interesting. Anyway, that's beside the point. So for Friday, February 14th, Mercury enters Pisces, which you got to pray for me for this. I'm kidding, kind of. But I personally believe that Mercury has a rougher time in Pisces than any other planet does in any other sign. And the reason why I believe that is because Mercury in Pisces is the only placement where Mercury is both in detriment and in fall at the same time. No other planet does that. So Mercury just has a tough time. I think the reason why is because with Mercury and Pisces is so subjective. Anything can be kind of true. Like Pisces just throws things out there. Like, could this work? Could that work? And it's so emotional and intuitive, which is great. Like there's great intelligence in those senses. It's just very different from how Mercury typically operates. And so things can become a bit foggy. It's almost like we don't know what to believe. Pisces can be very wise, but Pisces can also be very gullible. So with Mercury in Pisces, we're getting conflicting information. We're getting so much different information. This has also generally been a huge theme for the last 2 years with Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. Pisces energy in general, it's very foggy. I think Leo King said at one point years ago, it's only when planets enter Aries after Pisces that you wake up. You don't even realize that you're asleep or you're in a dream during these Pisces transits. So that's more true with Mercury in Pisces than any planet in Pisces, probably. So yeah, very strange that Moon is still in Virgo for this. Sun is in Aquarius. We have some very intellectual, rational placements, but Mercury, the king of rationality and intellect, is entering a very strange state. It's exiled. It's this is going to be a brief transit, though. It's only going to last a little bit over a week, which I'm personally excited about because I tend to have a rough time when Mercury transits Pisces. But I digress. What is the benefit of this? The benefit of this, I would say, is kind of the same. Well, it's similar to any detriment placement, and we do continue to have a lot. We've had a lot of detriment placements for many months. So for instance, right now, Sun, Mercury, Uranus, Jupiter, Mars, and I believe Pluto and Venus are all in either detriment or fall. Neptune is the only one at home. But Neptune doesn't own Pisces. Neptune's kind of like renting, since Jupiter is the official ruler. But what is the benefit? So the benefit with detriment placements is that it forces you to look outside the box. So there we have, I'm coming back to the same theme over and over again this week, looking, excuse me, whoa, that came out of nowhere. Looking outside the box. Okay, so Mercury in Pisces, I probably do more readings for people who have Mercury in Pisces than any other Mercury sign. And I think the reason why is because people who have Mercury in Pisces, or just in detriment in general, they're more willing to look outside the box. They're more willing to examine strange or unusual ideas that might be frowned upon. So my point is, with this transit, we're more likely to maybe consider information we wouldn't usually consider, or we may just come across information we wouldn't usually notice or we wouldn't be exposed to. So that can be exciting. And again, it's one of many aspects, many transits this week that indicate the potential for new awakenings and shifts in perception and consciousness. So as much as I despise Mercury in Pisces, it can be very exciting. That is definitely true for sure. We can learn a lot from it, and we can learn a lot intuitively. It's a very intuitive transit for sure. Okay, let's talk about the weekend. So Saturday, Moon enters Libra. It actually crosses over the south node at the very end of Virgo and then immediately enters Libra afterwards. So we're going to get a little bit of like some strange things are strange when we channel in that nodal energy. Moon crossing the south node, it means Moon is plunging into the underworld, so to speak. It's going below the plane of the solar system, kind of like a CD. It's plunging under that CD, so to speak. So as it does so, it is kind of a darker energy. But Moon in Libra is a pretty rad transit, in my opinion, / placement, because well, Moon tends to do pretty well in the Venus-ruled signs, Taurus and Libra. Moon in Libra is very methodical and thoughtful and introspective. It likes to think. We like to think before we act with Moon in Libra, which it tends to make things more peaceful. But also, Sun is still hanging on to the last few degrees of Aquarius. So Moon, though it may not be trining the Sun by aspect, it is trining by sign. We have, Sun and Moon both in air signs, basically. So things getting almost slightly harmonious. However, you have to take into account early in the day, Eastern time, Moon opposes Neptune. And by the evening, Moon's going to be stepping into an orb of opposing Venus. So again, the oppositions continue. On an emotional level, it's like we're getting hit like one after one. It's like hurdles. It's like hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. I don't know if hurdle is the best analogy. I was originally imagining getting hit by like buoys, as weird as that sounds, like in the water. Whatever, I don't know. But basically, we're getting hit by like wave after wave of intense energy and, changes in our perception, changes in our emotion, maybe, what we feel, what we value. All of that is changing so dramatically with all these oppositions this week. So that continues even with, peaceful moon in Libra. There are still culminations happening. Things, the gears are turning. Things are continuing to shift on a really dramatic level. And yeah, finally we're kind of done with the oppositions by the time we get to Sunday. Technically, Moon still does have to oppose Chiron, which is, like a planetoid. It's not really a planet, but so you can include that or not. But I do think the most intense of the oppositions are over. Clearly, the full moon is totally over at this point. By this point, the moon is losing light. It's beginning to descend, so to speak. It's waning. It's starting to wrap up the lunar cycle a little bit as we approach the third quarter moon, which we'll have next week. So yeah, very exciting stuff. And yeah, these past couple weeks have just been so weird. I know that you guys are feeling it too. I'm really excited Jupiter's direct though, as of last week. But yeah, definitely thanks for watching. Check in next week because things are going to continue to change and things are continuing to ramp up. We're going to get a really interesting quarter moon, I know for sure. But okay, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you have a fantastic week and I'll see you next week.